Redditors who work at remote places like forest officers, oil rig workers, etc. What creepy things have you noticed while at work? I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used, from what we knew, so we would get pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard screams of a woman over and over. It was some shoot, but the explanation was the wind making the noises as it blew through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it totally creeped us the frick out. I work as a polar bear guard. As in, I escort people across tundra and mountains and protect them from polar bears. I once saw a snowman totem with reindeer antlers coming out of his head. It was deformed, full of bullet holes and rather creepy. Even knowing only a little about polar bears, that sounds like it can be a terrifying job. What was your closest call with a polar bear? There was one time when I was going to the gym at 6 in the morning. Because it's just to the gym, I wasn't going to bring a gun. Then I got an alert on my phone saying a bear was in the area. So I decided to stay in bed and eat Maltesers. It later turned out that the bear was on my route to the gym at the exact time I would have been walking down without a gun. And it was dark and snowy, so I would definitely have been a entree for the bear. That was off duty though. On duty, there's not really been any close calls. Just the occasional "hey look everyone, there's a bear way over there. Have a look through my binoculars." Also just be a bit more alert. The rule is that if it is within 300 meters, I prepare to shoot it. If it is within 100 and coming towards me, that's when I really regrettably have to shoot it. I don't want to shoot a bear, and so far, I haven't had to. I hope I never do. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs for years, and it may not exactly be creepy, but I found it really unsettling. In deep, open water, the water itself is really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracudas hanging around the rig waiting for the onboard cook to throw off whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while a huge great white shark would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took like less than a second. They're really scary. I worked for a guy that spearfished underneath the rigs out in the Gulf. He said it was perfect since there were tons of fish underneath, and the sharks would never go between the legs. Just wait for a fish to leave. Plus the view was amazing, looking down and seeing nothing but abyss. He loved it. I can only imagine how scared I would be. I spent several seasons working at a remote field camp in Antarctica, over 1,000 kilometers from the main station in McMurdo. Every once in a while, a skua bird or Antarctic tern would accidentally end up following one of the small planes, Twin Otter, out to our camp. Once there though, they'd basically be stranded with no way to get back to the coast. I'd get out of my tent some mornings and see a lonely tern circling overhead, knowing it was a dead bird flying. It was quite creepy. Along these lines, when birds, or seals, do die down there, it's so cold and dry that their bodies don't decay either. They essentially mummify. Outside McMurdo at Scott's Discovery Hut, there is still a perfectly preserved seal carcass from 1912 sitting by the entrance of the hut. This is kinda fascinating. What did you do while in Antarctica? I was working on an ice core research team in West Antarctica. I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line staring you down for an unknown length of time. Or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100s of km away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. Might as well be in space. In space bears can't kill you, so it's worse. I spent some time in the peat swamp forests of Borneo studying wild orangutan. We would go into the forest very early around 4 AM. One morning there was a clouded leopard on the trail we used to enter the forest. It was just crouched there watching us. We shouted, tried to act big. One of the indigenous people we worked with even took out his slingshot and shot rocks at it. He missed on purpose, just trying to scare it off. It stayed there for a good 5 minutes watching us before it slowly walked into the thick brush off the cleared trail. When we walked by, I shined my light to where it had walked to and could clearly see a pair of reflective eyes only 3 meters away crouched watching us pass. Creepy, but also incredibly cool to see one in person for how critically in danger they are. I used to do agricultural work, alone in a field for 10 hours a day kinda thing. The pure amount of times I heard the sound of running and snapped out to see literally nothing there was horrific. I was convinced it was surely animals between the trees for a while. But the weirdest moment was when I heard it loudly from a row of trees next to me and immediately ducked under to see the feet of whatever animal was running by, and there was absolutely nothing. I remember trying to stay calm and walking really fast to the toilet block and sitting in there for a good long while before I came back. I never thought I'd be so freaked out in the daytime, but there wasn't a soul nearby for quite a way and it really amped up my imagination. As a prior deer hunter, I can tell you that the thundering noises from a squirrel can sound like a herd of elephants when out in the woods while all is still and quiet. This and raccoons. I grew up afraid of the dark and my grandparents both had fairly large pieces of land. The one grandmother always had some horror movie playing, a lot of Yeti, Bigfoot, Sasquatch stuff. Needless to say, 10-year-old Kiltech would sprint from the car to the house every night we'd get there and I was sent to fetch the bags. Worst anxiety in the world being told, "Hey Kiltech, go get this from the car for me," after we pulled in late on a Friday. Only other fun story I have is that raccoons used to claw at the back window late at night at my other grandmother's house. You'd see the light reflecting off their eyes and I always slept on the couch beside those windows. I was always waiting to shine a light at them and it be something other than a raccoon. You know, like Bigfoot. I had a pretty dope childhood, full of imagination. In my brief stint as a rural health nurse, I was quite unnerved by how many of the families I worked with still practiced ritual animal sacrifice, even though on paper they identify as Catholic. Where was this? The Philippines. I got stationed in some very remote areas around Visayas. I mean, those who do it are hardly the majority, but they're definitely present. Merchant seaman here. Nothing particularly creepy. Most of the time you're too focused on not hitting anything, getting position fixes, updating logbooks, etc. to really think about paranormal or spoopy shoot. But the closest thing to creepy I've experienced recently has been a strange transmission over the radio. It started with a series of Morse code beeps followed by an accented female voice listing off random letters and numbers. Dunno what the frick that was about. That would be a number station. They are typically used to give information via a one-time pad. Oh yeah, it definitely sounded like a numbers station. But the thing is, this was right off the coast of the US. I do a lot of work out in the woods. Creepiest thing was finding some headless doves. I also found sticks arranged in circles and paint on the trees in the same spot. Not sure if it was part of a ritual or not, but that's what I saw. I was a field geologist in the outback about 12 hours north of Adelaide. One day I was driving the truck and saw what looked like a flagpole sticking up in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't anywhere near a farm or anywhere else that people would be, so I decided to drive over and check it out. It was a dead dog fully impaled on a spike. Like, from butt to mouth. Took some pictures and had my boss call the cops, but for the rest of the assignment I was freaked out that some maniac was out there with me. Was this out near PD Peddy? Freaking weirdos up there, I tell ya. I went on a far-sicking road trip and on my way up, there was a guy rolling around on the road in 46-degree heat. Just casually rolling, on the road. It was near Roxby Downs. That whole area is strange. I used to be a delivery driver, which doesn't sound very remote, because it isn't. However, I did have to deliver to some pretty remote places. One time I delivered to a trailer park just barely inside our designated delivery zone and it was very dark and poorly lit. I leave my car running and keep the headlights and inside lights on to go deliver the pizza. Upon returning to my car, I sit down in the driver's seat and look up to see a creepy old man standing less than 3 feet from my side of the car. He was just staring. It was the equivalent of a jump scare. I just started driving forward, had to do a U-turn to get out of the park. When I turned around, the man was standing in the middle of the road, so I freaked out for a second before speeding around him, only to watch him attempt to chase my car out of the trailer park. I put in my 2 weeks after that. I'm not sure if this counts, because it's a farm, but when you live on a farm you work on a farm, so I guess I'll tell it. I grew up on a farm and in high school used to mess with my friends by hiding and making them find me. One night my friend was over and we were waiting on this other guy. We see him pull up, so we take off running to hide. It's funny, because they have to wander around somewhere they're unfamiliar with or go ask my parents and be told too bad you'll have to find her. It's like forced hide and seek. Anyway, this one night I saw my friend hide in one building while I ran for the trees. I was hiding under some bushes and heard breathing. Like human breathing. There were no animals around. It creeped me out so bad I ran out of hiding to greet my friend. I felt so uncomfortable for the rest of the night. Sometime during the night my dad heard something and went out to investigate. In the morning he discovered that one of our cows was killed and butchered. Butchered as in people meticulously separated the meat out? Or like something just started eating the cow? Someone stole the meat.